Today, we're going to talk about why many brands look at micro-influencers as the future and how you can capitalize. I'm Justin Moore. Welcome to Creator Wizard, your step-by-step guide to the business of being a creator. In this video, you're going to learn why a smaller following may be more valuable to some brands than a larger following, how to convince a brand to forge a long-term partnership with you, and how up-and-coming creators can get the attention of big brands. Before we get started, don't forget to click the link in the description to get a downloadable glossary of over 40 influencer marketing buzzwords, acronyms, and lingo that every creator should know. So today, we're going to be speaking with Amanda Goetz, who is CEO and founder of House of Wise and CMO of Teal HQ. Welcome, Amanda.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you recently posted a thread on Twitter talking about how brands can utilize influencer marketing on a limited budget. And you mentioned that you believe micro-influencers are the future. So can you expand on why you think that?
Yeah, so it's funny to think that influencer marketing has actually only been around for less than 5 years, 10 years. So we've already been trained to think about macro influencers, celebrities as endorsing brands. And when I think about startup marketing or what you can do on a limited budget, I think about breaking influencers into two buckets: macro influencers and micro influencers. They have very different goals for a brand. A macro influencer usually helps with just eyeballs and brand recall. So when you're going to build out a campaign and you want to use someone that you're going to pay for, you need to think about PR impressions, social impressions, share of voice, and aligning those goals and expectations accordingly. I think a lot of marketers think that the big celebrity is going to get a ton of conversions, but their audience has been trained that they are getting lots of brands to endorse them. And so the authenticity piece is where it gets a little fuzzy because you don't know where the authenticity fits in. That's why when I think about micro-influencers, and I actually think micro-influencers are the less than 10,000 followers.
Okay.
Sometimes even less than 5,000 followers, where that person almost knows all of their followers, either in some way, shape, or form. They've connected with them on LinkedIn or Twitter, or they're a friend of a friend, whatever. And they have meaningful influence. Those people are following them because they care about that person, their life. And the KPIs around micro-influencers are associated with your HVAs, your high value actions. So that's where you get into conversion and sales. And again, it just continues to go into authenticity and transparency. Those people usually don't work with big brands, and so they're excited.
Interesting. And so, you talked about KPIs a little bit. So are you able to, I guess, don't bigger brands need kind of a certain scale to be able to move the needle? And so how does that run? How does that work with micro influencers? Because like you mentioned, yes, they can drive sales and drive action and do more of kind of DR focused campaigns, but would you then need hundreds of them to be able to move the needle?
So again, it depends on what your goals are. And a bigger brand usually has budget to do both. And they're set up with teams and processes and resources to be able to figure out how to optimize both programs, right?
Okay.
So I would say that it depends on the size of the company, and then going back to what your goals are. A small startup, let's actually talk about a big brand for a second. So how do you find micro influencers if you're a big brand? Social listening. They're the ones retweeting, they're actively engaging with your content. And if you just listen to the people who are promoting you already, I think about your audience in a kind of 4 quadrants section or map. The lower left is somebody who's never heard of you, right? You want to move them to that next upper quadrant of, I've heard of you, but I've never tried you. And then you have people who have tried you, but are not talking about you. And then you move up to the golden, holy grail of marketing, which is they've tried you and they're talking about you. And you constantly want to move people through those quadrants, and there's strategies for all. But when you do social listening, you are going to find people in that top right quadrant that are loving you, have tried you, and authentically are your biggest cheerleaders. And so those are the people you tap for micro-influencers. You say, hey, would love to send you some more product and give you an affiliate link because you've had my best friend, she was trying this, face oil, and she's about to turn 40 and she has the best skin in the world and she authentically loves this oil. And she did a whole story about it. Literally the next day she was like, oh my gosh, they sent me an affiliate link. If you wanted to try this, like, hey, I'm going to make some cash money off of this, full transparency, but I swear it was not an ad. And I know she made so much money off of that because I bought, like, all of my friends' box were like, now I get to support her. And she authentically loved that. And it was like a perfect fit because I was like, she's almost 40 and she's stunning. So this is great. But again, it's just finding those people who authentically love your brand.
There seems to be this strange tension. Like some brands are totally on board with that. Like let's find the people who have authentic affinity for the brand. But then there are some brands who'd be like, well, why do we need to even pay them those types of people? Because they're already talking about our brand. We need to engage people who aren't talking about our brand, right? Like, how do you counsel someone who has that mentality? Because a lot of brands, because if I'm a creator's perspective, oftentimes what will happen is like, they'll reach out, they'll do some like cold prospecting or outreach to a brand, DM the brand's handle or something on Instagram or whatever. But if the brand sees that creator's already talking about them, posting about them, oftentimes it's like a struggle. It's like, why do I need to pay this person? They're already talking about me. How do you think through that mentality?
It's a good question. So I go straight for quantitative analysis of how much time it takes to find a cold prospect, convert them into a potential ambassador, and what the opportunity cost is. So you've spent this much time and effort, and your paid marketing is having to support that gap, right? It takes a while to onboard that person. And in the meantime, you're still spending to acquire new people to your product. So do the math and understand opportunity costs. If I get this person who now can create content for me, it's not just about the post. It's about that person's probably going to share their assets with you, maybe even do a photo shoot for you. It's not just pay to play, it's true ambassadorship. They're going to amplify deals, discounts all throughout your year because they feel like they're a part of your brand family versus prospecting a cold prospect that's like always promoting some new product and you're like, hey, you're good at influencing. Let me just like pitch you this idea. That's going to be pay to play. And you're going to get the minimum amount of work from that person. You're going to pay for every post. It will be, you have to be very buttoned up in your legal to say the post has to remain up for, 6 to 8 months or whatever your terms are. Whereas a brand ambassador, somebody who authentically loves you and is so excited, you're going to be able to build out a roadmap and different amplifications of them at a way lower price. And so again, doing the math, yes, they're already talking about you, but you could get more out of them for way less. Interesting.
And so I guess one thing I'm kind of curious about is like, okay, if you're trying to vet or find influencers who have authentic affinity for a brand, what are your criteria? So, I mean, obviously there's some tech, there's social listening tools and things like that out there where you can try to find some of those folks. But what about for like a newer brand or a brand who doesn't have maybe a ton of people talking about their brand already? How do you vet for someone who seems like they would be a good authentic fit and is not someone who's just trying to get paid?
Yeah. So I think about it in two ways. Psychographic, like how are their emotional demographics lined up, and lifestyle demographics. So like in less fancy terms, does their lifestyle match up with the product and brand sentiment that you're going after? Like for House of Wise, we care about empowerment and taking back control over things like sleep, sex, stress, wealth, like removing stigmas around talking about these things. I'm going to find women who authentically want to help other women, and they're less worried about putting themselves out there, and they're a little bit more bold in how they speak about those things. That's a tone and lifestyle characteristic. And again, sometimes it's about finding other brands that are aligned in some of those values or communities, following them, and finding people who are vocal in those communities and reaching out.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. And I guess that goes kind of hand in hand, which is like so much of influencer marketing is kind of one-off campaigns these days. You know, there aren't, I would say, as many kind of true ambassadorships or kind of these always on programs that may have been from the blogger days. You know, it was much more common to like, you know, partner with someone for an entire year. And like you mentioned, they're amplifying all your deals and all, you know, all your promotions and things like that. But so much, especially for macro influencers, so much of what they do now is these kind of one-off campaigns, right? So in your mind, what would you say is kind of the best argument an influencer can make to a brand about why longer term partnerships may be more valuable?
So if I'm an influencer, I'm thinking about recurring revenue, right?
Right.
And we know as marketers and advertisers, you have to touch somebody multiple times before they convert. The same goes for an influencer. And if they're not thinking about that's an issue. They need to realize that somebody probably needs to see them use that product a few times organically. Like, let's talk about skincare, right? If you wake up and like while you're doing a TikTok, they see it in your hand while you're doing a random TikTok, they're gonna be like, oh, that person actually uses this. And then like the next week when they say, hey, I'm partnering with this brand, they're gonna be like, oh, but I already saw her use it in 3 TikToks. I know she's obsessed with that brand. So it goes back to kind of the fundamentals of advertising. You have to have a few impressions before conversion works. Right. So the one and done, like launch campaigns, I just don't think work for conversion. They work for brand awareness. So if you are a startup and you raised a huge round and you can pay somebody, yes, that's going to put your name on the map. But then when it comes to time for like conversion, you need to start to get your product in the hands of people who are going to use it day in, day out, and it feels authentic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. So, again, kind of keeping our influencer hat on, like if you're an influencer, how do you think about platform strategy from a brand perspective? Like if you're, because I think there's 2 tensions. Like one is as a micro influencer who is up and coming, where do they focus their time? Which platform? Obviously, there's this opportunity cost, like you mentioned, of like, okay, if I devote all my time to TikTok or I devote all my time to Instagram or something, I may not be able to concentrate on other platforms. Like, how important is it for you to be able to have an ability to do like syndication across a bunch of different platforms if you're partnering with an influencer? Or are you very much like, okay, let's do a TikTok campaign. I don't care if they're anywhere else. Like, let's just partner with this TikToker. Or like, how do you think through syndication and social amplification for smaller creators?
I think it's really difficult for smaller creators to be creating great content across multiple platforms. Like, marketers understand it is a different content strategy per platform. You cannot say and spray. You can't just repost your tweets to Instagram unless it's like comedy and that's a content strategy. But so smaller influencers, you think about why you're reaching out to them. 1, they authentically love your brand. 2, they probably have high engagement rate. That's obviously a barometer you want to be looking at. And 3, they're good at something, like whether it's great photography, maybe it's their humor, maybe it's they've figured out TikTok. Their Instagram may not be great, but their TikTok is killing it. And it goes back to, I like to say, like, content is no longer king, the creator is king, which the feminist in me wants to say, like, queen, but the creator authentically knows how to talk to their audience, and they know their strengths. They know where their stuff is going to perform because they've built an audience. I spend the majority of my time on Twitter because that's where I've built an audience, and that's I can play into my strengths. My Twitter is like 15 times more followers than my Instagram. And I don't spend as much time there because I know that that's not where I perform well. And it's not what I'm good at. I'm not good at curating the perfect picture. I just am unfiltered thoughts all the time. And so brands know if they're going to reach out to me, if they're asking me for an Instagram post, that is just not going to be aligned with like how I think about what I do best.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's hard, I think, as creators, because like you also hear the struggle of like, okay, well, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket, especially like if you're a TikToker, right? It's like, okay, I build up my entire following there and then boop, it's gone in like 2 seconds, you know? And so it's like wanting to balance that with having a diversified business, I guess, and making sure that you at least have an email list or something maybe that you can be able to fall back on and contact your followers. Well, one thing that I was talking with someone the other day about this, that like, there used to seem to be a lot more interest in like leveraging a creator's, oh, I have 50,000 people on my email list. Like, oh, that's great. I'd love to do a blast on that or something. But so much of influencer marketing these days, as it's become more of a commonplace tactic, it's much more, okay, this campaign, we're going to partner with 20 people. They're all going to do one Instagram, one Facebook, it's like, it's very like finite. There's not a lot of flexibility, especially if now the media agency is involved or something like that, right? So there doesn't seem to be a lot of flexibility per partner, per creator that you're working with, of like leveraging some of these other unique channels that some folks may have. Do you try to leverage that in some of the campaigns that you're working on, or do you find value in that?
So I think it goes back to the fact that we're talking about micro-influencers as being the future, because when you go to a macro influencer, someone who has an agent and has a standard contract, you're going to have to pick from the menu. And that doesn't feel good as a brand. You want to custom create. And some of the great creators, will do that. But if you're truly going after like influencers who do this as a job, right, you'll see that, right? And so these micro influencers are like, let's talk about this. Like, and yes, it does add time and resources. But when I was at the Knot, we thought about our influencers as a full year, because people spend about 12 months planning their wedding, right? And so we called them our like class of, 2019, 2020, whatever. And they knew that they were with us for a year and planning their wedding. We're helping them. And then they actually recruited the next class for us because they were talking about how fun it was, etc. But we spent a lot of time with that group of people. And in fact, to the point where some of the social media team was being invited to their weddings, because you are spending time dedicated to these people, but the outcome is really, really organic and way more than you'd get from a macro influencer, or in terms of number of pieces of content. Now, again, it goes back to what we started this entire conversation of, is goals. If your goal is eyeballs, then yes, a macro influencer is going to get you more eyeballs. But if you're actually looking for conversion and the best bang for your buck, I would say find these micro influencers and do a bottoms up brand impression strategy.
So in addition to being able to do, let's say, all this added value content that's not part of the partnership and creating all this goodwill, are there any, if you could make a recommendation to some of our viewers who may be up and coming creators, like how can they get the attention of big brands? Because I think a lot of the strategies, what most folks do is like DMing the brand's handle on IG, and like what oftentimes will happen, especially if it's a larger brand, it'll be like, it's like the community manager or something, or it's the person at the agency who's handling the social. It's like it's very disconnected from the actual marketing team or the decision maker of who's actually working with influencers, who's doing that. How can creators like that, what's the tactic or some of the strategies that they can employ to kind of get on the radar of some of these larger brands?
The smaller brands, meaning startups who want people to be a part of their exciting journey, I would say DMing the founders. And like as a founder, when I get a DM or an email or I hate to say LinkedIn, but maybe not LinkedIn, but like something from somebody who's like, I tried your product, I'm obsessed with it. How can I help you get more out of this? How can I support this? That to a founder is music to their ears, and they're going to say, let me get you to this person who's going to get you on our social. This person's going to do this. And these smaller startups, they don't have big teams. And so the founder is a great place to start, and they'll punt it to the next person, but at least it has some oomph behind it. Bigger brands, it's hard because, again, they have budgets, they have a strategy, they're thinking about curation. Really, they're finding people. They have a way broader pool to select from, and they're saying, what story am I trying to tell as a brand? And let me find someone who kind of can help amplify that sentiment or mission. So they are a little bit more selective, but that's why I think if you are a micro-influencer, you have, less than 10,000 followers or even, less than 25,000, and you want to start doing more of this stuff, reach out to the team. It doesn't take long. You just go to LinkedIn, you type in the name of the company, you're going to see who works there.
I think that's great advice, because there is definitely, I think, something to be said as a micro-influencer to building up your portfolio to some degree, right? Like being able to say, oh, I've worked with these, even if they're startups or smaller teams or whatever, like to be able to have some case studies that you can, put behind your name so that when you do get in contact with a larger brand or something like that, you're able to lean on some experience and not screw it up.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say is, like, if you are an influencer or an aspiring influencer, do a brand audit. Think about the brands that you actually use in a day, like whether it's your makeup or what workout, stuff you're using, or, I just got a Whoop and I'm like, using it and talking about it, but actually do a brand audit of all the things that you use. And then you have kind of a prospect list ready to go, because you can authentically say, I've been using your foundation for the past year, and I switched from this to this because of X, Y, and Z, and I am obsessed with it. I tell everyone about it. Brands want to hear that, but it's easier to do it that way than to be like, what brands would I like to be a part of?
Absolutely. Just being much more intentional about it. I love that. Awesome. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today. How can people contact you or follow you, that kind of thing?
I'm most active on Twitter. I am very unfiltered, so find me there, and my DMs are open. So if anybody wants to reach out and talk about marketing or anything that I'm building, happy to chat.
Awesome. Thanks again. So I hope you enjoyed the interview. I would love for you to subscribe and hit that notification bell to be alerted every time I upload a new video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below, or maybe you have future video ideas, and you are one step closer to becoming a creator wizard. Don't forget, if you want insider tips on how to grow your business as a creator and diversify your income, click the link in the description to join our free newsletter. You'll get exclusive videos, worksheets, and insights on the influencer marketing landscape, access to special product discounts, first look at upcoming courses, and more.